Start recording. We are recording. Okay. Hey everybody. We are pre-recording a session for the symposium of the Seashore of Endless Worlds. My name is Wassim Alsindi, and this is Max Haiven.
Hello.
And we're going to have a conversation about art and games and all of that good stuff. But let's just quickly say something about the exhibition, which we're recording this in October, so it's opening in a few weeks. We'll be in Geneva both for the opening and also for the workshop in early November. And I believe the symposium airs at the end of the month, so we are speaking through time to you. This is the list of the participating artists. And without any further ado, we are going to talk about play and pedagogy. So let's introduce ourselves. I'm Wassim. I do research and write stuff, and turns out make games with a collective called the Fau0x Salon. And Max.
My name is Max Haiven. I work as the Canada Research Chair in the Radical Imagination at Lakehead University. I also make games and research all sorts of things having to do with the imagination and how to activate it.
All right. Hold that thought on activating the imagination. So I'm just going to say something very briefly about the Fau0x Salon, which is the collective that we founded in Berlin a few years ago that is participating in the exhibition. So I'm one of the members of that collective. So it's a collective creative endeavour which critically interrogates digital culture through discourse, events and residencies. Since 2020, we've been hosting salons, which are intimate post-disciplinary discussions on a range of conversation topics, and stewarded by the Salon team members. The community researches topics, organises events, and authors law, critical theory, poetry, philosophy, games, theory, theatre, and visual art. So I just want to show you really quickly a few of the different bits that we do. I really appreciated this write-up in the brochure of the exhibition. It's in French, so I translated it because I don't speak very good French. But I thought it was very nice, so I just thought we'll read that out and use that as a departure point. Reactivating the formula of chat rooms, meeting formally described as societies or circles dedicated to the debates of ideas. So Fau0x Salon is a collective project which pursues an approach which is post-disciplinary and production, cultural and... That's not a very good translation. Anyway, we develop various formats to understand creative ways, performative or playful themes, and they include the ecological impact of cryptocurrencies, polite use memetic.
It's amazing.
I have to use some of these. Criticism, social movements, post-humanists. All right. So enough of that. Translate
Deus ex machina.
More on that later. So here's a list of some of the topics we discuss in the Fau0x Salon from time to time. The current topic is called profit motives, which is implications of technology, capital and divinity. We occasionally issue printed matter. I've made this magazine recently. We write some poetry. There's some examples of some of the very experimental texts that we write. We made a radio play in 2021, improvised, unscripted audio play. We made theatre productions funded by the European Commission's Starts Repairing the Present programme last year with the theatre premiere in Denmark. And we made an interactive storytelling, choose your own misadventure game about Bitcoin boarding the oceans, which is currently on exhibition at the Haus der Elektronisches Kunst in Basel in their virtual gallery, and the next performance is in November in Berlin. So just very quickly want to reveal to you one of the kind of exemplar kind of characters and emblems that we see in some of the works that we've been doing recently. So we all know about the annoying Microsoft Office paperclip Clippy, but what about an anthropomorphized Bitcoin mining machine called Hashi? Well, it's a central character in a lot of the projects we've been working on, and it's a virtual influencer from the future, so don't be surprised if you see it around more and more as time goes on. And its job is to gaslight and manipulate you into thinking that you should keep it plugged in. So watch out for that.
Probably did the translation.
Probably did the translation.
Hashi.
Okay, so onto the main topic for today, which is the card game called Fau0x Salon that the Fau0x Salon's been developing for the last few years. And so it's a discursive role-play game. The game acts as a ludic pedagogic mechanism to initiate and steer post-disciplinary discussions from a variety of perspectives beyond the opinions and beliefs of the players themselves. So the game proposes itself as a narrative device for the hypothetical exploration of emergent consensus and dissensus, agreement and conflict, concerning both the sacred and the profane. And by operating as an anticipatory mechanism for the simulation of possible scenarios, the game allows participants to think, feel, and act their way through strategies and solutions without the burden of connecting hypotheses to their lived realities and identities, i.e., you're not going to get cancelled for saying something when you're role-playing as somebody else. And so we think of it as a dissonance engine, as a way to kind of brew up tensions in these hypothetical and counterfactual discursive environments that we find ourselves in operating the 0x Salon. So the idea is the card game pops up conversation. And so here's the first jumping off point that I thought you and I, Max, could have a little riff on. And so so the exhibition is about games and play. But those words like, professors have got tenureship off the back of definitions of words like this. And so one of the points that we've discussed before about this card deck is we're not even sure if it's really a game. We're not sure if it depends on how you define these things, because in the process of playing this card game, which is kind of like a character-based discussion sequence, there are no points. Like there's no kind of scoring that you're doing in a kind of quantitative or objective way, or even a subjective way. And there's also no victory condition. So the game just kind of ends when you decide it ends, or you run out of time, or you get bored, or everyone just gets distracted. So there's no winner, and there's no competitive aspect beyond the conversation itself. So I guess like a purist in terms of gaming might say that it's not a game.
Right.
It doesn't fulfill some of the criteria of a game.
Well, the other word for a purist in terms of gaming is a spoil sport, so fuck them. I think, if we invited like 10 people off the street to look at this, these cards we're looking at here from the game, from a previous version of the game than the one that will be in the gallery, I think 8 out of 10 people would say, and you said like, what is this? 8 out of 10 of them would immediately say it's a game. One of them would say it's probably a new form of money, and one of them would probably say it had something to do with magic and divination. And that seems to be the sweet spot. Yeah. I'm not one of those purists. I sort of think that we kind of know a game when we see one, and most people do. So
where would you fit on this?
Oh my goodness!
Alignment chart we see on the screen here that's behind us.
I think it might be. I think it might be down there definitely on the bottom row, maybe second or third column, somewhere between the second and third column.
So somewhere down here.
Yeah, and maybe it's maybe kind of like here, like and also there's somewhere in the tarot and Cards Against Humanity. It's down there for sure.
Lower, bottom right quadrant.
Bottom right quadrant, right. for sure.
Yeah, I'd say I'm also there. That's probably why we're friends.
Yeah,
and you'll see a bit more about like why we might be friends in a minute as we talk about the games that we've been working on.
Yeah.
But I just thought, like, let's. There's a bit of text on the screen on the slide from Huizinga and Homo Ludens, which was like quite a seminal text about gaming. And just so there's this quote: like, "Play is free. Play is in fact freedom. Play is distinct from ordinary life, both as to locality and duration. Play is, creates, and demands order, absolute and supreme. Play is connected with no material interest and no profit can be gained from it. And games embody the spirit of play, a temporary suspension of the rules of life to make space for the intensities of experience, levity, rivalry, concentration, and joy."
I mean, I think the thing about Huizinga is I love reading Huizinga. I always gain something when I go back to that Homo Ludens book. But I think the reality, and I'm not the first person to say this, is that anyone who tries to theorize play is going to fail. It's a failed task because play dissolves all sorts of boundaries and all sorts of categorical boundaries. So I think Huizinga's right to attempt his theorization, but his theorization can't help but be wrong. And there's all of the categories that he presents here we could problematize, and every game I think that I've ever played breaks some element.
Is it because
of this.
play itself is a transgressive act?
I think play, yes, and I think play in some ways is a word that we use for transgression.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a word we use for transgression after the fact or before the fact, but yeah.
Yeah, this reminds me a bit of so our colleague, GVN, who's also got involved in some of the works in the exhibition. We were trading notes some time ago in a message board. And these are GVN's notes from the Homo Ludens. So these are kind of criteria or desiderata, let's say, that the sandbox of play. It's a free place. It's separate, or it's circumscribed within limits of fixed space and times, bounded. It's uncertain, so we're not in some kind of deterministic universe. There's a point to the play. The teos is not encoded. It's unproductive. So maybe this gets to the transgressive part, where we're saying that, because theorizing about something is a kind of productive act. So perhaps the transgression is kind of encoded in there. It's governed by rules, and it's an act of the suspension of belief or make-believe or fantasy. Yeah.
I mean, they're useful distinctions, but I think as soon as one takes a playful approach to even these definitions, they begin to fall apart. Because the reality is, many games that we play are kind of actually compulsory in some ways. I mean, many of the games that we first learned to play as children are, sure, they're voluntary, but in ways they're compulsory with older siblings or, bullies at school or something like that. Is it that separate from the other spaces and times? I actually think there's kind of an overlap. I think actually most games are rigged, whether we acknowledge it or not. Are
they games without play, then? Are they kind of games without play?
I mean, I think games without play is just torture.
But there's some if the bully is making you engage in a whatever competition.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound that playful to me.
Yeah, it's the game eclipses play.
Yeah.
But somehow play is still there in the same way the sun's still there when the moon eclipses it, I think, in a weird way.
Yeah.
Because otherwise there wouldn't be the alibi of saying it's a game. Right. But I think there are cruel games and there is violent play and yeah. Mm-hmm. So I don't mean to just be endlessly deconstructive about everything, but one of the things I love about play, and Derrida also makes this point in his stuff about play, is it just dissolves everything. It's a kind of acid or something like that. Yeah.
All right. So we can always come back to these themes in a bit. I thought let's switch gears now and we'll walk through the evolution of the Fau0x Salon card deck. So what we've ended up with for the exhibition is a kind of a tarot deck, basically 78 card tarot deck, and we'll do so that they're going to be on display, and we're also going to be playtesting the game as well. But just to give you an idea of the origins of it, because it wasn't really that intentional a project. So I was in the early days of the Fau0x Salon, we had a little ritual where we'd make a meme, out of the format of Magic the Gathering cards. And representing the topic of the discussion.
So it's sort of like a non-scarce collectible.
I mean, it was even just a JPEG, so it wasn't even. There's no NFT or anything like that. Right. It's not printed.
Right.
Just literally just the image, and we put that on the topic page on the Salon website. And then we got to the fifth topic, and we made a few more than one. And then after that, we were just making cards out of random word plays and neologisms and little turns of phrases. As pop into one's mind from time to time. And so we made a deck of those. There's about 60 of those that we made in 2020. The link is there, actually. It's on Arena. If you look up Magic Gallery, you can find it. And then in the pandemic, I was stuck in quarantine, summer of 21. And among other things, I guess some productive quarantine mental breakdown led to this game, the first edition of the concept of the game, the first edition of it, which definitely took a cue from the Magic cards, both in structure and the game, in terms of function as well, mechanics, and also the aesthetics. We used a bit more of a Dungeons and Dragons type characteristics, or attributes, let's say, scored attributes, like this confidence, bookishness. You can see in the middle row here, experience, resources, theory, and praxis are these the attributes of the characters in the game. And by analogy with Magic, so in Magic you've got creatures in the deck and they go on the table and you're beasts and you do battle with the other players. In our game, the characters are emissaries for discourse. So they go into conversation with each other, or you're pulling the strings of those marionettes. That's what we're doing in the game. We're role-playing a topic that we choose of our own choosing through the eyes of the characters. And then different cards are modulating the sentiments or the filters, the worldviews that the characters have. So I can exemplify that a bit better in the second edition of the game that we made in 2021. So the top left card you can see here is called Corpus Algorithmi, and this X means it's an ideology card. So you would play that on top of a character to change the worldview of the character, or to mutate it towards that of the ideology that's being embedded within it. So if you look at the character next to it, Deepfake Chopra, that is a kind of new age mystic grifter. But then if you would play the Corpus Algorithm, or let's do something more fun. Let's play Acid Communism, the card underneath, on top of Deepfake Chopra.
Oh my god!
So then you have a new age mystic grifter that is a radical leftist, which I think signals quite a departure from where I imagine that person would have been before. So then the idea is for you to role play, or like to engage in the discussion through the lens of being of Deepfake Chopra, through the like Damascene moment that they've discovered acid communism in. And then just to give another couple of examples, on the left and the right of acid and communism are a card called Trust and a card called the Turing Shroud. So these are infrastructures. So Trust is a workspace. We're actually in Trust right now recording this.
Just got so meta.
Yeah. And the Turing Shroud, well, that is a piece of clothing that was found in the Dead Sea with Alan Turing's face on it, obviously. So those are buffs. Those are kind of enchantments to the creatures that improve their characteristics and improve their chances of like engaging in conversations and rebuttals, which is the crux of the game. So we made a third version of the game this year. We made a new generation of new set of generative art, this time with Midjourney. Last time we were using VQ, GAN, and Clip, and Stable Diffusion. And we bulked out the cards. So we ended up now with over 100 cards in this version of it, which is great because now we're at version 4, which is what you will see in the exhibition. And these are just I'm going to show you some works in progress as we're, we don't have the cards in our hands yet, but they'll be real by the time you see this. So let's tell you about the process of making these cards. So until now, it was quite I made all these cards. I came up with the ideas, the texts, generated the images, home printed all these card decks.
The puns. I mean, wow, this guy.
And
puns, wow.
We played a lot. Did a lot of play testing over the years at Trust. And then, thanks to the Seashore of Endless Worlds, gave us the reason to really finish and complete the game. And so, just to say that there's the team that's been working on the game. Christopher Degg-Outhet has been working on he's done a great deal of the work on the production, the design, the coordination, project management. Nick Copenhagen and Twee Whistler have been working also on the production and more on the graphics. Darius Wu came up with a custom typeface set of glyphs for us, incredible font work. And many people in the community helped us play the game. And thanks again to FTW, Christian Billy and Samuel Wagen-Magnon for making this all a reality. So I just wanted to show you a bit more of the new card deck. And so it's the same in terms of the structure. So these are character cards, and they have these attribute scores. And you would use these to determine your rates of success in different parts of the conversation process in the game. So it's a turn-based game, a bit like Magic the Gathering or something like that. And so when one of these cards is in your hand, you put it on the table, one of the characters, then that's in play for you. It's one of your emissaries, one of your diplomats or whatever. And then when it's your turn, you have a chance to engage in discourse. So you would roll the dice, 6-sided dice, perhaps one a bit like this. And you roll that, and the result of that, the outcome of that between 1 and 6, will determine which of the characteristics, confidence, bookishness, experience, resources, theory, and praxis, that you would be arguing on the basis of. And then if people want to interrupt you, once you start talking, you have 2 minutes on the clock. You can do whatever you want with that. And other people can start interrupting you. Whichever other characters are in play, they can also then roll the dice on the same characteristic that you're arguing on the basis of to interrupt you. And they have their own scores to determine the rates of success or failure of that. So that at the base level is the kind of mechanic of the kind of character on character discourse. These are the ideology cards that we mentioned earlier, and they've developed quite a bit now. I would draw your attention particularly to the token gated paradise. So very familiar looking figure on that card. Wonder how that happened. And so the idea is that these ideologies are warping the minds of the characters. So the characters had some kind of, persona before that, but this thing has really taken root. You can think of it as a temporary mania or something like that. And so these are the more oracular kind of characters, cards. We call them like enchantments. So these are modulating the way we see the world. So we have a global topic. We choose a topic around the conversation at the start of the game between all the players. And then these cards are modulating the way we see the topic. So we have the ideology cards we showed you before are changing the views of the player. And then the enchantment cards are changing the views of the topic. So we've got these multiple kind of contortions and distortions, which is why we sometimes call this game Twister for discourse.
Yeah.
Because you're really trying to contort the intellectual avenues and pathways that people are going through using the different mechanics. And just to say something about, I think one of the things that's unusual about the card deck and the scenarios that it facilitates, whether we call them games or not, is up to you, is that the point of the card deck is not the ludic environment, the play that it instantiates. The point of the card game is to not get in the way of the conversation. So it kind of facilitates something and then tries to background itself. And that's a bit different to the normal way we think of a game, which is meant to occupy your attention. It's meant to create an immersive world that you stay within, for the suspension of disbelief, for this sandbox of play, if we call back to Homo Ludens. Whereas in this, the ludic environment we're exploring is still meant to be immersive, but it's more scaffolded with the contributions we make through discourse rather than through the mechanical scaffold of the game. So as we've developed the game, we keep finding ourselves resisting the temptations. The oldest temptation to game designers is to make things more sophisticated to satisfy their own desires for complexity and Rube Goldberg machines and better mousetraps. So we keep making the game simpler, as we've been going through, to get out of the way of the conversations. I think that's kind of an interesting kind of anti-pattern in game design that it seems unusual to me.
Yeah, I think so. Allow me 2 observations about this game. I mean, the first is, I think, for those who are watching who've never been to a 0x Salon, I think I want to sort of set the stage for you, because I've been to maybe 2 or 3 now, and not 13 or something that have been going on. But it is an incredibly fertile space of incredible minds coming together, and it's like you are both playing a ping pong game or a pinball game, and you are the pinball in the discourse. You go from people bringing up weird information about medieval cults to the finer nuances of computational methods to high theory to low theory to popular culture. And so over the span of maybe a 2-hour conversation, you really see that you have an amazing gathering of people who can go incredible places with their minds together. It's sort of a roller coaster. And it strikes me that the game is very much it emerged clearly within and for that audience. So it is a kind of it's a game native to that ecosystem, and it supplements the way that ecosystem works and allows it to then expand out from just the salon instances to 4 people playing at a table, 2 people playing at a table. It reminds me of something that I researched. I was doing some research many years ago on Pokemon cards. And when the designers of Pokemon cards set out to make them, they were really, really crafty because they actually hired a bunch of anthropologists and others to study the way children already played.
This was in Japan?
In Japan.
Okay.
And then they were like, how do we make a toy, basically, that isn't just going to, like, steamroller over the way children play, but is actually going to insinuate itself within the way that they already build social worlds. And they also, so there was a really interesting set of thinking that went into making that incredibly successful product. There's something similar here, that it's like, how do you take the spirit of the salon, to risk using that word, and then make a prop to allow that spirit to revivify itself. The second thing I think is really interesting is that, like, I think the 0x Salon, it has been, and Trust, where it's often taken place here, are spaces where you have a lot of incredibly smart experimental people, but I think most of us don't really know how to. It would be very rare that you'd find somebody who would, like, vociferously stake a position that they're gonna, like, their hill to die on. People tend to move between different things. There's a kind of ironic, post-ironic, like, vibe, which is very common in the worlds that we circulate in. And it's interesting that in the game, the objective of the game, or the character in the game, is that you actually get a character who has to defend a position in the way that almost none of us who are at the salon would. So it is a kind of like a...
Yeah, they're all hill diers, aren't they?
They are, yeah. And in fact, that's the structure of the game, is like you have...
I mean, you can move between hills, because the way we structured the ideology cards is that you basically get infected by the ideology for one discourse. It's like Corona. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, that's kind of interesting. I think that it gives us this experience of being far more committed, but in a certain way, in order to play the game well. And I don't mean to win, but to have this well played game in the common sense. Like, you need to also. It's a game that is born of the meta, and it thrives on the meta, even though the actual role play itself is having this kind of doctrinaire character in some way, temporarily doctrinaire.
But of course, like, and we'll get to this in a minute, about the kind of performative nature of playing and games, is that, even though almost nobody that will have play tested the game so far is the sort of person that would die on a hill for a loosely held belief, it's still fun to perform.
Oh my God.
Put yourselves in the position of somebody that really believes in something, even if it's something extremely, like, improbable, sort of conglomeration of facts and circumstances.
Well, you know what they say, the only thing more fun than playing a zealot is being a zealot.
Right. So maybe it's dangerous. Maybe we should put health warning on the game.
Well, that is also, I mean, there's a long history of people designing games and then people getting caught in their own games.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe we're inside the game now.
Hashi.
All right. Let's talk about some of Max's pedagogical play work. So you've been working on a game which seems to be called Billionaires and Guillotines at the moment.
Yep.
And it's in the prototyping phase, I guess. We've played it a few times. Do you want to tell us about the game?
Sure.
Why you made it in the first place, and what you hope people to get from going through the process of playing it?
Well, the first thing I'll say about it is it's quite distinct from this game, because this game is a narrative game. So really, and as you pointed out, the purpose of the game is it's an infinite game. It expands endlessly potentially, and the objective of the game is to keep playing, is to expand, to get even more sort of gonzo and weird,
To colonize the territories of discourse, the imaginary territories of discourse.
And just to keep, Whereas I like to design much more finite games. I like to design games that are, that look more like conventional games. So just because I find it as an interesting design challenge. I love playing discursive games and narrative games. But so Billionaires and Guillotines, in this game, you play up between 2 to 5 rival billionaires, and you're trying to accumulate things that billionaires like, including space toys, social media companies, luxury properties, mega yachts, and art treasures. And throughout the course of the game, as you compete to get these tokens and fill your token card to win, the world gets worse. As the billionaires accumulate wealth and compete with each other, things fall apart, and in the game...
I don't know what you're talking about, Max.
Yeah, I know. In the game, this leads to the appearance of revolt cards, and then if too many revolt cards are drawn in a mechanism that may or may not have been stolen from Pandemic, there will be a revolution. And at one point in the game, there's a kind of crucial moment when the billionaires can choose to set aside their differences and cooperate in order to forestall the revolution.
You actually see on the screen
Yes.
the panic card here.
The panic card that gets drawn. And in addition, the billionaires are playing different roles. So one of them is playing a gangster, one of them is playing a banker, one of them is playing an influencer. It was a very powerful card because you survive the revolution if you're the influencer, because you're spared by those you have influenced. And in general, it's a game that takes between 45 minutes and an hour. It's fun for the whole family. But it has a very different sort of pedagogical function, or no, maybe a similar pedagogical function, but a different pedagogical operation.
You know, the method of delivery or something.
Yeah, definitely. But it's fun, I'm glad to say. Yeah.
And so, in a game like yours, and like a game like Billionaires and Guillotines, like the lessons which you learn from playing it, like they're a little bit more kind of encoded within the logics of the game.
Yes.
So you're playing as a billionaire.
Yeah.
Each of the participants in the game plays a different kind of billionaire archetype, and we're squabbling over meaningless trinkets like luxury properties and mega yachts, space toys, as the
world burns.
Planet crumbles. And from the viewpoint of a billionaire, well, these are just like minor inconveniences on the way to you collecting the things that you want. I remember, which cartoon was it? Maybe it was Family Guy. Like Peter Griffin meets Bill Gates. I think it was Family Guy, and they're up in a helicopter. And Peter Griffin says to Bill Gates, "Oh, from up here, all the people look like ants." And then Bill Gates just looks at him dead eyes and says, "They are ants." And I've kind of got that feeling playing the game.
Yeah.
That, like, you know, the lives of normal people, mortals, you know, plebs, is utterly inconsequential. You just have to make sure that they don't chop your heads off.
Yeah.
So it's a very, like, everything's normal. We got guillotined.
Yeah, it's a play the enemy game. So I'm trying to teach the players something by getting them to play. I mean, unless you're a billionaire, in which case, congratulations. Also, watch out. These are the enemies, and so we're trying to understand their strategy and their worldview. And I try and do that in the game in a couple of ways. The first is I take the language from Ian Bogost of procedural rhetoric, by which he means like a game can teach you something even if you strip out all the discourse and all the images. So, you know, the classic example is Monopoly. If you strip out all of the discourse, all of the images, all of the money, and you just look at what the operations of the game, you go round and round on a board endlessly in a war of attrition of all against all that is based on accumulation and zero-sum economics. And that teaches a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old or however young people are when they start playing Monopoly, all the lessons they need to learn. All the stuff about kind of like 1930s aesthetics or community chest and money bags and all of that, that's just icing on the cake. That just confirms the rhetoric that's already there within the rules. So I'm really interested in working with procedural rhetoric in that way. And I'm also very interested in working with emotions. So in Billionaires and Guillotines, I try and bring the players in the course of those 45 minutes of the play through a series of emotions. You begin with this kind of elation, like, hey, I'm rich, I can get this stuff really easily, I'm accumulating, I'm making money.
It starts easy.
Yeah.
Like the first few assets come easily to you. So you get some, like, you've got a little objectives card with 5 different asset types on it.
Yeah.
And you're trying to collect all these 5 and then you win.
Yeah.
And so the first few come easy.
They come easy, you're feeling on top of the world, and you feel like, hey, I can live and let live. You know, like, Wassim, you want the mega yacht? I want the space toy? No problem. Then, of course, things start getting scarce, and the revolt token gets higher, and things start getting frustrating because the things you need are not forthcoming. So I'm trying to play again with frustration. And then comes this kind of explosive moment at the climax of the game, because I'm trained as a literary scholar, so I'm interested in narrative structures. At the climax of the game, you get this moment where you have to choose either to cooperate or to compete. And spoiler alert, the vast majority of the time, but at that point in the game, and this is the third element I try and work with, the kind of role-playing, the thing that the game invites you into through the role-playing, makes you make a decision that you might not have made if you just sat down with your friends to play it. There's a kind of like, you know...
Some Milgram experiment shit is going on.
Well, don't tell that to the Research Ethics Board at Lakehead University, but sure.
Talking about Stephen Milgram, the unremarkable agricultural researcher.
Not his brother.
Moving on. So, like, this was the first version of the game. It's also nice to see like how these games evolve as we go through the prototyping phases. We showed you the 4 evolutions of Fau0x Salon, and so I know that you've been working on. This is like from a recent playtest of the game, so you can see kind of how it's laid out. And I know that you've been working on like some updates. You're getting closer to making this happen.
Yeah, we're hoping to do a crowdfunding campaign early in 2024, have it ready for the Christmas market so everyone can take it home and play Christmas Billionaires and Guillotines with your family. I know that's what you're looking for. This is an early design palette from Amanda Preeb, who works with us. I direct an outfit called the Reimagining Value Action Lab that's producing the game, and Amanda works with us extensively on lots of our different design things. So this was a kind of design palette that took inspiration from a kind of like Nightmare Ayn Rand, Bioshock vibes, thinking about billionaires. But I think we're already moved on to different aesthetics. But sometimes we need to create the aesthetic in order to take the next step. And what I like about, and I think this is a good example of this in this game as well, is that in making games, there's a wonderful cross-pollination between thinking about mechanics and rules, thinking about aesthetics, thinking about narratives. I find it very, very satisfying as a form of creation.
It's very rich.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, both in this kind of like whatever material form of paper and tokens and board games, but also in the kind of digital form of like computer games. It seems like you can get really close to the notion of a Gesamtkunstwerk here. You can throw everything into these kinds of environments that you create.
Yeah. And the other thing that I love about games and game design as an artwork is your craft has to include structuring the agency of the player. And that is that sometimes happens in participatory artwork in certain ways and other forms of artwork, but it is really a beautiful thing to think through. Because if you give too much agency, things fall apart. If you give too much structure, it's boring. It's a very, very interesting dialectic tension.
Yeah, and we've all played games. Well, many of us, I'm sure, have played games where we might have felt that there was too many rules, it was too constraining, it was too complicated, it was too off-putting. Or sometimes you figure the game out so quickly that there's no challenge left there. So there's this kind of sweet spot in game design, depending on who you're designing the game for. That's another thing as well. So we're in Germany, which like turns out is the world capital of board games. I didn't know till actually you told me, Max. You told me something crazy like 75% of all the board games in the world are sold here or something like that.
Something like that. I mean, the statistics
are wild. The majority of board games in the world are bought in Germany somehow. And because of that, there's probably there's quite a big community of game designers. And the thing about game designers, I work with blockchain technology, and I actually see blockchain developers and game designers as like very much kindred spirits. They just love to make complicated things to satisfy their own curiosities and amuse themselves. Not that they're necessarily be playable or useful. They're like, it's Rube Goldberg machines. Yeah.
I mean, there's a nice distinction between what is a game and what's a simulation. And a simulation, when you want to simulate something, then you want it to have a kind of mimetic quality that mirrors some sort of problem or complexity in the world. It necessarily simplifies it, and I think a game is fun.
Right. But then would you say the simulation is still play, though?
Yeah, I think it is.
All right.
It might not be fun, but it's still play. Yeah.
So like a war game or something, it is essentially still like role play, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right.
And there's a reason why I think even very complex war games are very popular.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I generally think I talk about this with my friend Fanuel Antwi, who's an author in our publishing series, who is a very good friend of mine and really respects the work I do, but hates games. And in a way, I think what it leads me to think is that there are some people who are into games because they really love the idea that the world could have rules. And there's some people who are into games because we're anarchists in spirit, and we just want reality to break.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that
people can arrive at the game from different constellations and meet in the sandbox of the game.
People can do that in a good game.
In a good game,
yeah. Okay. But many games, people can't.
Can't bring them along.
You can't bring those two groups together,
right.
Because you get a game that's either way rule heavy, and it like the people like me who just want to break rules and figure out how to break things are going to be dissatisfied, or you have games that are way too sort of open and unstructured, and then the people who really like rules are like, I cannot figure out what I'm supposed to do.
Okay, right. Yeah. So there's like another kind of tension or balancing point in terms of complexity and like taste.
Yeah. So it's like, what type of traumatized child are you?
It's like a DSM manual taxonomy job. I just thought, like, we've got a few minutes left. I thought we would get to some other points that we discussed with Christian and Samuel from the Seashore of Endless Worlds. And there was this. Let me just bring up the images. Very important. On the left, the games of money. Yeah, excuse us. Yeah, I both very much enjoyed coming up with the Accursed Share earlier today, and then I also very much appreciated Midjourney's rendition of the Accursed Share, which is what you see there. But on the left, we've got this question, which I thought we could riff on for a few minutes, which is so we're talking about games and money in an anthropological context. So in the age of prompting, let's elaborate on relations between games and money as ambivalent anthropological objects, processes, as in games versus play that we discussed earlier. We talk about the different forms of speculation. And then there's this wordplay from the French, entrain, so play, which is entrain, entertains and recursively trains games into other games, so meta games, in infinite games. I just thought I'd also close with this idea of Turing completeness, which is to do with computation. And at the bottom, there's a screenshot of a paper which says Magic the Gathering, the card game, which our card game is based on. You can create a Turing complete programming language inside the card game. What? It's absolutely insane, but it's for real. That paper exists. You should all go read it. Whoa. So you can build programming languages inside a card game, not a computer game, card game, that can kind of operate in a kind of procedural way. So yeah, like, I don't want to go too much into that rabbit hole because it's completely insane. Yeah. But let's think about like games and money. And this idea of like, we've been using. And so actually, let's riff on the title of the exhibition is the Seashore of Endless Worlds. And when I used to give lectures about commodities as money, one of the things that always interested me was that things like seashells would have been a commodity money in a inland community because they would have been rare. So. We use abstract notions of value, like tokens of representation, as substitutes for monies, as commodities. But the question is, like, I guess, like, when we have these kind of commodities that are these collectible objects, like, are we then playing games? Is our monetary systems, are they becoming games themselves?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I have two thoughts about that. And one of them is I'm just going to channel the spirit of the dearly departed David Graeber and say that maybe gambling came before money.
Okay.
And that, in fact, maybe we as a species invented money so we could gamble more effectively in a funny way. Yeah, and I think there's actually some anthropological evidence to support that, but we'd have to defer to our ghost anthropologist friend. And the second thing I would say is I think that's true. I think there is a way that, of course, like in a highly financialized economy like ours, that's also super digitalized, we've seen this trend towards gamification and the application of like game-like procedures and rhetorics and approaches to all sorts of different things, including to money. I'm writing and reading a lot right now about the whole GameStop thing, which, the name itself reveals this interesting dynamic where people started playing a game against the rules of the global economy, like a game within a game. And there was a game even within that because that whole system with the Robinhood trading app and everything else was also gamed. So you begin to see these kind of strange nested games that start to play out in this economy as all sorts of financialized subjects begin to do this. But the one thing I would say about that, relative to the shells is I also did some research some years ago about wampum beads, which were the type of shells that were traded before Europeans arrived in the east coast of North America. It was super interesting. You're exactly right that like it became very, very valuable inland as a commodity and as a spiritual commodity as well. But when the Europeans arrived, one of the first things the British and Dutch did is they started counterfeiting it and manufacturing and flooding the market. So in a way, as the moment that wampum went from being this complex anthropological object with many different uses and potentials, the moment it became money was the moment of colonial violence.
Corrupted,
Yeah.
I think something very similar happened with glass beads made in African deserts, and also European visitors being like, "Oh, that's your money. We'll be right back."
Yep.
And like some people believe that's how slavery started.
Right.
Very possibly like corruptions of the local economies.
Yes. There's a similar story in West Africa also about cowrie shells and how those also became this money and currency of the slave trade as well.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe money is a colonial Eurocentric virus. You heard it here first.
We're actually running heavily out of time. But I just thought I'd put up some more of these things to question and ponder, like for you guys to enjoy. We haven't really got time to speak about them, but I'll just put them up and just like I'll leave you with the last point, which is don't hate the player, hate the game. Think about the dimensions or the implications of the possibilities of performance and agency and role shifting as we engage in like ludic and pedagogical experiments. Oh, that's my timer.
Game over.
Tell us that the game is over. 45 minutes is up. So thanks very much for listening. I'm Wassim Alsindi. This is Max Haiven.
Hello.
And we'll say see you later.
Ciao.
Thing.